While we're talking about money, the recent budget passed by the state of Ohio significantly cut school budgets to statewide. Chagrin Falls was luckier than most. You're only losing $144,000 in 2017. But how can the district adjust to make up for this cut? Mr. Hogan.
Well, as far as state funding, state school funding goes, I know I was on an alternative funding committee like back in 2008, and there was all kinds of talk about the state funding formula and, you know, that we need to do this and that. And I tried to get the message across that I don't believe that Columbus sees Chagrin Falls as needing any more money. So if there's any change to the school funding formula, it's typically not going to be good for Chagrin Falls, so that we're very much on our own. As far as making up $144,000, it's, you know, it's an ongoing project for our superintendent and treasurer to find that money and make adjustments and make cuts, you know, make good, prudent fiscal decisions. And as far as where that is actually coming from, I wouldn't be able to say.
Okay, Mr. Weingart.
I think we can all agree that the school funding system that currently the state has in Ohio is not in Chagrin Falls' favor. As you said, the budget cuts weren't as bad, but they were a lot worse initially. And without the lobbying by our administration and school board and the state legislator, it would have been a lot worse. One thing that I know that's hard for me to swallow is that Chagrin Falls on average receives 27% less funding per student than private school kids from the state. That doesn't seem right. How is that possible for a public school to be receiving less per pupil than a private school student? So I think we're faced with a difficult task. Obviously, as Mr. Hogan said, Columbus doesn't see, you know, what life is like in Chagrin Falls. They see us classified as a rich district, and all the weight is being left on the residential taxpayers. So, you know, it's a tough situation, but unfortunately, we're a victim of the system, and without us continue to lobby to change it, we're just going to get stuck in the same way.
Okay, Mrs. Garvey.
I was a director of strategic planning for a startup biotechnology company where I led strategic planning initiatives to align strategic goals with limited resources. And a company that was going back to investors over and over again to find money to fund our research. This is what needs to be applied to the Chagrin Falls schools. We are always going to have constraints on our resources and demands from our teachers and our residents on what they expect for a high quality education. So I think one, we have to very thoughtfully align our goals and our priorities with our resources. And that is something that the school board plays a part in, helping the district and the superintendent hone those strategic goals. But then secondly, I think Mr. Weingart touched on this a little bit, which is we are not going to sit back in Chagrin Falls and let things happen to us. I would like to be more involved in the conversation in Columbus and helping them to understand what we are facing in Chagrin Falls so that we are fighting for every penny that we can get to help support our schools.
Mr. Kashi.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, the recent budgets passed by the state of Ohio left Chagrin Falls with a $144,000 shortfall in 2017. How can the district adjust to make up for that cut?
Okay. I think that's purely an administrative job for the treasurer and the superintendent to work together. And this is something that's not publicly ever told, but our treasurer has been awarded like 5 years in a row for how well of a job she does from the state of Ohio. Okay, they will find that kind of money, $144,000 in a $25 million budget is something that I believe is doable, just on the surface. and, you know, they'll make it work. I think we have really good controls in place. I think the budgeting process is done well. We've been able to, the board mandated about 5 years ago or 6 years ago that we have a minimum cash balance, and we've been able to hit that every month once we got to that cash balance. So you're talking now about, I think, 4 or 5 years. So I think as a district, they'll be able to handle a $144,000 shortfall and figure it out. It's the future that's where the problem's going to be and what's going to happen in the future.
Mrs. Thomas?
We've actually been planning since the last levy for budget cuts from the state because we see them coming all the time. So we've been planning by taking a very good look at staffing, at class size, at textbooks that we buy. We did apply for and received a straight A grant, which is no remedy for the lack of funding from the state. However, it did relieve us of several $100,000 in costs that we were going to spend on Chromebooks for our students. We got that money from the state. So we've been planning for this budget shortfall. So we will make the budget shortfall in 2017. However, as Harry said, it's the future that's the problem, and it's also the present that's the problem. The state has cut funding to districts like ours. There's a formula. Instead of getting $5,700 per student, we get around $800 per student from the state. But if one of our students goes to a private charter school, a non-performing charter school, or a performing charter school, $5,700 follows that student right out of our budget. If we have a catastrophic issue with special needs child, the state funding is not there anymore. So we have to plan for these shortfalls constantly, and that's what we do together with our administration.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Brose?
I mean, I think more important than the question of how to adjust, because I agree our superintendent and treasurer will figure out how to make the cuts that we need to. That affects our students in the classroom. And the funding on the state level is not helping Chagrin Falls. I think we need to be thinking more strongly about how are we proactively having a stronger voice in Columbus. Our superintendent should be commended. You mentioned that, you know, other districts were cut more severely than Chagrin Falls. The initial budget that came out had a more restrictive cut to Chagrin Falls, and he did a phenomenal job getting parents to reach out to their representatives and say, you know, we have concerns about this. We're a small district and we need these funds. And I believe it was effective. So I think having a stronger voice in Columbus is very important. I also think we can leverage other districts like ours. I mean, there are other districts that are small in size and are also suffering the same ramifications of the current formula that we are, and maybe working together will get further with the state.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I do. I have one. I just want to say that you don't necessarily need to be on a school board to have a strong voice in Columbus. We constantly ask our parents to participate and to talk to the state legislators and to express the concerns that we have in the district. We also do work with other districts now. I don't know if you're aware, but we're part of the Alliance for School Funding, where we work with many other districts that are our size, and Andy Pottigill, who was a former superintendent, who heads that up. And we do try to influence legislation. So it's up to everyone, not just the school board and not just the administration. When we live in a community, we need to react to things as a community. And so I believe that it's important for every citizen in our community to be engaged and to help us by talking to their state legislators. And if they don't do what we need them to do, we need to vote for someone else.